Welcome to a fireside reading of Moby Dick by Herman Melville, Chapter 49, The Hyena. There are certain queer times and occasions in this strange mixed affair we call life, when a man takes this whole universe for a vast practical joke, though the wit thereof he but dimly discerns, and more than suspects that the joke is at nobody's expense but his own. However, nothing dispirits and nothing seems worth while disputing. He bolts down all events, all creeds and beliefs and persuasions, all hard things, visible and invisible, never mind how knobby, as an ostrich of potent digestion gobbles down bullets and gunflints. And as for small difficulties and worryings, prospects of sudden disaster, peril of life and limb, all these, and death itself, seem to him only sly, good-natured hits and jolly punches in the side, bestowed by the unseen and unaccountable old joker. That odd sort of wayward mood I'm speaking of comes over a man only in some time of extreme tribulation. It comes in the very midst of his earnestness, so that what just before might have seemed to him a thing most momentous now seems but a part of the general joke. There is nothing like the perils of whaling to breed this free and easy sort of genial desperado philosophy. And with it I now regarded this whole voyage of the Pequod and the great white whale its object. "Queequeg," said I, when they had dragged me, the last man, to the deck, and I was still shaking myself in my jacket to fling off the water, "Queequeg, my fine friend, does this sort of thing often happen?" Without much emotion, though soaked through just like me, he gave me to understand that such things did often happen. "Mr. Stubb," said I, turning to that worthy, who, buttoned up in his oil jacket, was now calmly smoking his pipe in the rain. "Mr. Stubb, I think I've heard you say that of all whalemen you ever met, our chief mate, Mr. Starbuck, is by far the most careful and prudent. I suppose, then, that going plump on a flying whale with your sails set in a foggy squall is the height of a whaleman's discretion?" "Certain. I've lowered for whales from a leaking ship in a gale off Cape Horn." "Mr. Flask," said I, turning to little King Post, who was standing close by, "you are experienced in these things, and I am not. Will you tell me whether it is an unalterable law in this fishery, Mr. Flask, for an oarsman to break his own back, pulling himself back foremost into death's jaws?" "Can't you twist that smaller?" said Flask. "Yes, that's the law. I should like to see a boat's crew backing water up to a whale face foremost. The whale would give them squint for squint, mind that." Here, then, from three impartial witnesses, I had a deliberate statement of the entire case. Considering, therefore, that squalls and capsizings in the water and consequent bivouacs on the deep were matters of common occurrence in this kind of life, considering that at the superlatively critical instant of going on to the whale, I must resign my life into the hands of him who steered the boat, Oftentimes, a fellow who at that very moment is in his impetuousness upon the point of scuttling the craft with his own frantic stampings, considering that the particular disaster to our own particular boat was chiefly to be imputed to Starbuck's driving onto his whale almost in the teeth of a squall, and considering that Starbuck, notwithstanding, was famous for his great heedfulness in the fishery, considering that I belonged to this uncommonly prudent Starbuck's boat, and finally, considering in what a devil's chase I was implicated, touching the white whale, taking all these things together, I say I thought I might as well go below and make a rough draft of my will. "Queequeg," said I, "come along. You shall be my lawyer, executor, and legatee." It may seem strange that of all men, sailors should be tinkering at their last wills and testaments, but there are no people in the world more fond of that diversion. This was the 4th time in my nautical life that I'd done the same thing. After the ceremony was concluded, upon the present occasion, I felt all the easier. The stone was rolled away from my heart. Besides, all the days I should now live would be as good as the days that Lazarus lived after his resurrection. A supplementary clean gain of so many months or weeks as the case might be. I survived myself. My death and burial were locked up in my chest. I looked round me tranquilly and contentedly, like a quiet ghost, with a clean conscience sitting inside the bars of my snug family vault. "Now then," thought I, unconsciously rolling up the sleeves of my frock, "here goes for a cool, collected dive at death and destruction. And the devil fetch the hindmost." Chapter 50. Ahab's Boat and Crew. Fedallah. "Who'd have thought it, Flask?" cried Stubb. "If I had but one leg, you would not catch me in a boat, unless maybe to stop the plug-hole with my timber toe. Oh, he's a wonderful old man." "I don't think it's so strange after all on that account," said Flask. "If his leg were off at the hip now, it would be a different thing. That would disable him, but he's one knee and a good part of the other left, you know." "I don't know that, my little man. I never saw him kneel." Among whale-wise people, it has often been argued whether, considering the paramount importance of his life to the success of the voyage, it is right for a whaling captain to jeopardize that life in the active perils of the chase. So Tamerlane soldiers often argued, with tears in their eyes, whether that invaluable life of his ought to be carried into the thickest of the fight. But with Ahab the question assumed a modified aspect, considering that with 2 legs man is but a hobbling wight in all times of danger, considering that the pursuit of whales is always under great and extraordinary difficulties, that every individual moment indeed then comprises a peril. Under these circumstances, is it wise for any maimed man to enter a whale boat in the hunt? As a general thing, the joint owners of the Pequod must have plainly thought not. Ahab well knew that although his friends at home would think little of his entering a boat in certain comparatively harmless vicissitudes of the chase for the sake of being near the scene of action and giving his orders in person, yet for Captain Ahab to have a boat actually apportioned to him as a regular headsman in the hunt, above all, for Captain Ahab to be supplied with 5 extra men as that same boat's crew, he well knew that such generous conceits never entered the heads of the owners of the Pequod. Therefore, he had not solicited a boat's crew from them, nor had he in any way hinted his desires on that head. Nevertheless, he had taken private measures of his own touching all that matter. Until Cabaco's published discovery, the sailors had little foreseen it, though, to be sure, when, after being a little while out of port, all hands had concluded the customary business of fitting the whaleboats for service, when some time after this Ahab was now and then found bestirring himself in the matter of making thole pins with his own hands for what was thought to be one of the spare boats, and even solicitously cutting the small wooden skewers which, when the line is running out, are pinned over the groove in the bow. When all this was observed in him, and particularly his solicitude in having an extra coat of sheathing in the bottom of the boat, as if to make it better withstand the pointed pressure of his ivory limb, and also the anxiety he evinced in exactly shaping the thigh-board, or clumsy cleat, as it is sometimes called, the horizontal piece of boat's bow for bracing the knee against it, darting or stabbing at the whale, when it was observed how often he stood up in that boat with his solitary knee fixed in the semicircular depression in the cleat, and with the carpenter's chisel gouged out a little here and straightened it a little there. All these things, I say, had awakened much interest and curiosity at the time. But almost everybody supposed that this particular preparative heedfulness in Ahab must only be with a view to the ultimate chase of Moby Dick, for he had already revealed his intention to hunt that mortal monster in person. But such a supposition did by no means involve the remotest suspicion as to any boat's crew being assigned to that boat. Now, with the subordinate phantoms, what wonder remained soon waned away, for in a whaler wonders soon wane. Besides, now and then such unaccountable odds and ends of strange nations come up from the unknown nooks and ash-holes of the earth to man these floating outlaws of whalers, and the ships themselves often pick up such queer castaway creatures found tossing about the open sea on planks, bits of wreck, oars, whaleboats, canoes, blown off Japanese hunks and what-not, that Beelzebub himself might climb up the side and step down into the cabin to chat with the captain, and it would not create any unsubduable excitement in the forecastle. But be all this as it may, certain it is that while the subordinate phantoms soon found their place among the crew, though still, as it were, somehow distinct from them, yet that hair-turbaned Fedallah remained a muffled mystery to the last. Whence he came in a mannerly world like this, by what sort of unaccountable tie he soon evinced himself to be linked with Ahab's peculiar fortunes, nay, so far as to have some sort of half-hinted influence, heaven knows. But it might have been even authority over him. All this none knew. But one cannot sustain an indifferent air concerning Fedallah. He was such a creature as civilized domestic people in the temperate zone only see in their dreams, and that but dimly. But the like of whom now and then glide among the unchanging Asiatic communities, especially the Oriental Isles to the east of the continent, those insulated, immemorial, unalterable countries which, even in these modern days, still preserve much of the ghostly aboriginalness of Earth's primal generations, when the memory of the first man was a distinct recollection, and all men his descendants, unknowing whence he came, eyed each other as real phantoms, and asked of the sun and the moon why they were created, and to what end. When, though, according to Genesis, the angels indeed consorted with the daughters of men, the devils also, add the uncanonical rabbins, indulged in mundane amours. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you again same time tomorrow, 5 Pacific, at Fireside Reading on Instagram. And please check out the YouTube channel, Fireside Reading. And if you would like to subscribe and like and comment, please do. I would like that. Until I see you again, please be very well. Good night.